Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our round 2 live stream for the Pebble Beach Pro-Am. Going to get you guys ready for all your betting and DFS exposure with a look at the weather report, some of the stat averages, Underdog Prize Picks props. I'll look at some matchup bets as well, and whatever you guys want to deep dive down there and chat. So first off, welcome on in. Say hi as you guys get into the live stream and hit me up with any bets that you want me to deep dive. See, we already have a question about some two balls and matchups, which I'll definitely be going over towards the end. So just stay tuned, Zach. We'll get to that towards the end of this. We're going to kick it off with a look at some of the stats from today in the Underdog and Prize Pick side. So out there for round number 2, the weather does look like it's going to kick up in the afternoon. But for the first half of the day, I think it's going to look very similar to round number 1. So these averages that we have from Thursday are going to be pretty valuable for most of tomorrow. So the scoring average at Pebble, which is the easiest out of the two, played nearly a whole 4 strokes under par. And then Spyglass Hill played a whole 2 strokes under par. I will say that I was not expecting these kind of scoring averages, and I thought they were going to play much more difficult. So, definitely a course read that I got pretty wrong today, but I kept my exposure light, right? I didn't go crazy out there for round number 1 because you get some wacky stuff for the first round sometimes. And what you saw at Pebble was an over 5.5 birdie average, which was even higher than last year when you had lift clean in place. So part of that is pin locations, really simple over the first few days as they have that Pro-Am going on, but also next to no wind, which was a big factor for the entire day. Spyglass Hill, you did have a slightly lower birdie average, was over an entire birdie lower, but the bogey average really wasn't all that much different. So really the main difference in the scoring, the reason why it played a whole stroke and a half easier was because there was nearly a stroke and a half difference, or a birdie and a half difference, I should say, out there from golf course to golf course. So that's why if you guys saw my Ship It Nation stream earlier, when I was touching on some of the stat averages and what to go through with your lineups tomorrow, I was telling you guys to play all the guys at Pebble because it plays significantly easier than the 2 courses, and it had the weaker field out there for round 1. Guys like Scotty, Rory, almost all of your guys in that 9-10K range were up there at Spyglass Hill. So even with the harder scoring, that's where a majority of your top level players were. So out there for tomorrow, though I do think it gets a little bit different in the afternoon, early on, you really want to be at Pebble Beach. Now, out there for the last 2-3 hours of play, it does look like the winds are going to start to kick up. So I have the HRRR model up here for Pebble Beach, and you'll see that right around 1-2 p.m. local time, the winds go from non-existent to in that 10 to 14 mile an hour range. And more significantly, the wind gusts go from single digits there in the morning to closer to 15 to 20 miles an hour. So that's really where I think the scoring average might start to change. But if we target players that are starting at 8:30 local, that's when the first tee time, 8:35 local time, over there for Friday. I mean, if we have somebody starting right around the first, maybe second group off, they're going to be finished with almost all of the rounds. Hell, they might even finish their entire round before the wind gust really become a problem. So I would say if you can target some of those early tee times, these scoring averages going to be pretty much exactly what we get for tomorrow. So for example, if you can find some early Pebble Beach players, around a -4 scoring average is what I'd be projecting for. If you can find some early guys at Spyglass Hill, like a 2.25 under par scoring average is likely what I'd be calling for over there. Worth noting that with the better players at Pebble Beach now, maybe the guys that are going off in the morning play to an even better than a 4 under par scoring average. So to show you guys some of those players, we have the tee times up over here on pgatour.com. And the players that I really think are going to get the best conditions are the players going off of Pebble Beach, as we mentioned before, but also going off of hole number 1. The front side of the golf course is by far the easier of the two. And in fact, it played like 2.3 strokes under par out there for Thursday. So if you can start on hole 1, get through your first 9 to 12 holes when conditions are going to be calm, I could see guys like Keith Mitchell, Denny McCarthy, and Adam Scott and Gary Woodland that are going off of 1 on Pebble Beach. Or even going down here to a Zal Torres, Chris Kirk. I could really see them having a good Friday performance. So part of that comes down to the weather and avoiding those late wind gusts. Now, you could go out there and target some later starters if you're looking for some fades, right? So the opposite of true is true, of course. Out there with this weather situation, if you're looking to take stances against players, maybe you do want them to have as late a tee time as possible, right? Hopefully, early, maybe even playing the hardest holes there towards the end of their round, wouldn't be a bad idea to take players in that situation. So I can tell you that the winds are going to the north, that holes 8 and 9 on Pebble Beach are going to be really tough towards the end. So that's kind of why I want my guys starting on hole number 1, is not only can they play the easier side of the golf course when conditions are perfect, they're prime, they're for the taking, but they can also get past 8 and 9, which will be directly back into the stiff wind by the time it gets significant there in the afternoon. So that's kind of the idea with the tee times and what I'm expecting from conditions. But I would say that by the end of the day, right, scoring average is probably going to be closer to 3 under par with those winds kicking up. And then at Spyglass Hill, it wouldn't surprise me if it was like 1.5 under par as opposed to 2.25. So I think it's going to depend on when your guys teeing off for what kind of conditions they're going to face. But it does give us some opportunity for fades and positive stance plays, right? If we go after some early guys, we might want to take some overs on birdies, some unders on strokes. And then on the flip side, if we're trying to juice up our payout or get rid of some of the correlation roles that you have on both these sites, maybe you take a later starter at Spyglass and you try and fade them for one of their strokes lines. So I think it gives you a lot to think about when you have a 2-course setup, especially with conditions kind of changing throughout the day, but it does open up quite a bit of opportunity as well. So let's go over here to Underdog. I've got a few props and prize picks I already like as well. And let's catch up on chat. What's going on to Peach? Welcome on in. What's going on, Mark, Scotty, Lurking, sure everyone on that leaderboard has checked for I have no idea what you're saying, Mark. You kind of gave me a jumbled mess there. I guess you're saying that Scotty's kind of like Tiger. Everyone's kind of looking around for him. For sure, if that's what you're saying. He's, I mean, when he was -5, he almost got to -6 by the end of his round. Players just have to be chuckling to themselves saying, like, his first round back and he's shooting -5, like, we're in trouble because he wasn't even making that many putts, right? He was slightly into the positive with the shots game putting. Iron play early on had left a lot to be desired. Like, his first 3 holes were terrible, but by the end, he was striping it like we're used to. So yeah, dude, he's an absolute stud. What's going on, Birdie? Shout out to the high ball flight take. Got you on Cam Davis. Of course, yeah, a lot of those guys towards the top, Birdie, guys that you would say that kind of fit that description. And I think it's going to be that way going forward. Like, maybe not Russell Henley, but like a Jake Knapp, you would certainly say that about. I know Justin Rose isn't a bomber, but he hits the ball really high. It's working out so far, right? Let's see how it works over the next 3-4 days. But I appreciate the shout out on that. Let's talk through a few props, though. So what I was looking at on Prize Picks, so they don't have these over an Underdog. So that's why we got this board about 20 minutes before we went live here. But in under on Will Zalatoris strokes, I think makes a lot of sense. He's going off of 1 on Pebble Beach and early. He's got an 11:48 Eastern time tee time. So that means he's going off at 8:48. He's the second group off tomorrow. And then you have Sam Burns, who is playing Spyglass Hill. So that's the harder of the 2 courses, but he's also the second group off. So with the birdie average at about 4.37 per round, and Sam Burns was the number 2 or 3 birdie maker on all the PGA Tour last year. You have somebody like Willie Z who really fits this style golf course. These are 2 props that I was looking to mix in. Now, you do only get a 2.7x payout because of the multiplier rules, but I was thinking maybe we can add a matchup or potentially a fade for one of the later starters to get a better payout here. So those are just the first 2 that were kind of catching my eye. We don't have a full board posted over here in Underdog yet, but that's kind of the general sentiment that I'm going with, right? I'm trying to, take my positive stance plays early, trying to take my fades a little bit later. So speaking of, just to kind of go through some of those players, let's go to the tee times and let's see some of the late guys on Spyglass. So the reason why I say that is Spyglass Hill, I've heard people say they think it's more protected. The golf course plays harder in the wind. So I know that people think that they can use their Giga Chad brain. They can go through and be like, oh, I'm going to galaxy brain this. And it's the more protected golf course. It's the harder golf course, and harder golf courses play harder in the wind. If you take a look at the data, it has reflected that when we've played this golf course in the past. So I know some people would probably disagree with this, but I really, really like the idea of fading guys starting on the back 9 late on Spyglass. And the reason I say that is the front 9, it has some holes that are completely exposed to the wind. I think it's holes like 2 through 5 that are out there on the coast that are going to be playing directly into the breeze. So they're going to play especially hard for the guys that are finishing there on the second half of their round. So if they're starting on hole 10, they have to play their first 9 when it's a little bit calmer. That's also the more inland part of Spyglass. So if you were going to get a quote unquote advantage to playing on that part of the golf course, it wouldn't really be there, right? If you're playing that part of the course early. And then when the winds start to kick up, those guys are going to be in the winds towards the latter half of the day. So a few players that would fit that would be like an Eric Van Roy and a Taylor Moore. Now, I don't know if we're going to have a line for a Taylor Moore to fade, but maybe a Bazanehoot line we could fade. He's had really shitty form heading in. He also carried himself with the putter round one. If you can't tell, I'm pissed because he made like 6 birdies today. I went over his birdie line when I faded him. And Akshay Bhatia, we might be able to find him on the board, a Sun GM, a Corey Connors. But let's see what we have there. So the one that I really want to check is Bazanehoot because he was carrying himself with the putter a little bit. Let's see. So yeah, he's there at 70.5 strokes. Like if you're going to find a fade, right, I think this is the kind of player that you take it on. And if you're going to fade somebody playing over there in Pebble Beach, I did mention that 8 and 9, I think you're going to be especially hard. If you're going to do so, you would go to the guys starting on 10 and going on Pebble Beach. So those kind of players that we could use for a fade would be a Matty Fitz, a Cameron Young, a Ben Griffin, a Mark Hubbard are guys that could be potential fades. An Eckroat, a Davis Thompson, you'd throw into that as well. I'll just say based on like the round one stats, I mean, Matty Fitz, a Cam Young are probably the players we want to look at. Let me bring up Bet the Number so I can show you guys some of the shots gained metrics out there with those few players. But that's kind of what I'm thinking for fades is that depending on the golf course, you want to target a certain subset of tee times because we know what holes are problemsome around these golf courses, and especially 8 and 9 in Pebble Beach. They're among the most difficult that you have. And based on the wind direction, they're going to be even more difficult tomorrow. So just to go through these, let's bring up Cam Young and then Matty Fitz. So I'm going to star both of them so we can do this a little bit easier. And I'm actually going to throw in like all those guys that were down there towards the bottom. So Van Royen is one of those last tee times. Who else? Hubbard, Griffin, and we're going to do it for both the courses, right? We're just going to see like who has the worst stat profile that we can fade. So let's go Griffin, Hubbard, Eckroat, Thompson. Hubbard, Eckroat. And this is what I love about Bet the Number, by the way, who is sponsoring this live stream, is that I can just star all these players that we want to go through, and then we can compare them all to each other. It makes things a lot easier than having to try and do it piece by piece. We already have EVR starred. Let's do Taylor Moore, Akshay, Bazanehoot. Okay, so Taylor Moore, Akshay. Okay, Bazanehoot. And then who else? Let's go Sanjay, Corey Connors. We'll do those. We'll cut it off there. It'll be like the last 3 groups on each golf course that we're going to fade. And then Corey Connors. Alrighty. So let's sort it by all the guys that are started. Okay, I didn't mean to do that. Bring up the metadata out there for the website. That's definitely not ideal. But let's go over here, bring up all the starred players. So if we take a look at the top end of the board here, we're looking for the worst shots gained metrics in terms of ball striking. So your lowest ball striking would be a Matt Fitzpatrick. Your second lowest would be a Taylor Moore. And then a lot of these guys kind of played well. So like a Mark Hubbard's probably not the best fade candidate. So let's get him out of there. And Austin Eckroat, him gaining nearly 2 strokes ball striking, like let's get him out of there, right? A Sun GM, he only gained about 0.3 strokes ball striking. That's well below his baseline. Bazanehoot lost. Let's take Thompson out of there. He also gained about a stroke out there ball striking. But guys like Ben Griffin that are negative, Akshay Bhatia that was into the negative, Corey Connors, Matt Fitzpatrick. I guess we'll take Cam Young out. Cam Young also lost a bunch of strokes putting, which is unlikely to happen again. He lost like 5 strokes putting. He might lose a few strokes putting, but he's not going to lose 5 strokes putting in back-to-back rounds, you'd think. These are the best players that we could use for a fade. And I usually try and take a look at approach play as well. So you can see Akshay, he did gain nearly 2 strokes on approach. Just had a really bad day off the tee. So maybe we'll take him out of consideration for a fade. And then I hate to say it, Bazanehoot did gain on approach. So maybe we take him out. As much as I want to fade him after he screwed me today, maybe it's because he was playing better golf than some of these other golfers. Same thing with the Ben Griffin here, right? Ben Griffin gained about a half a stroke out there on approach. Now we're left with like these 5 options to go out there and fade. Taylor Moore, I'm almost positive we don't even have lines for. So I guess we're going to take him out of the mix there. That leaves us with an EVR, Sanjay, Corey Connors, and Matt Fitzpatrick. So going through these, we're going to take Bazanehoot out. Again, I kind of want to fade him, but 69 strokes for Matt Fitzpatrick. I guess he could be an option, but he is playing Pebble, You have to keep that in mind, which is the easier of the two golf courses. So I kind of would prefer to take a fade in Spyglass, but we'll see what we have in terms of these other lines. Let's go Sungjae, Corey Connors, and EVR. I just want to see what we have for lines because I don't know where they're posted. Sungjae, Eric Van Rooyen, and then I guess no EVR lines posted. Okay, that's fair. And then let's see if Corey Connors has anything. So Corey Connors has a line there at 70 strokes. So just to go through these, they have Sungjae at 69.5, which is a little bit better than the scoring average from today. He does play Spyglass, though, which I think is huge. Same thing with Corey Connors, though, but he's up there at 70 strokes. So just for the sake of this, I'm going to take Corey Connors out because, honestly, Corey Connors, Sungjae kind of project for the same, like, general projection. Like, they're within probably like 0.1, 0.2 strokes of each other. So if that's going to be the case, like, I'd rather fade the guy down there at 69.5. I guess what we have to decide between now is if we want to fade the really out of form Matt Fitzpatrick or if we want to take a chance on fading Sungjae. I kind of feel like Matt Fitzpatrick's the better way to go about it. I did fade him today and it worked out, but you can see it's because his ball striking was utter horseshit. Now, the reason for fading him is because he's been horseshit lately. Like, for lack of a better word, he's been terrible. Lost strokes on approach his last 5 events out, which is just a really tough scene. Off the tee, he's been a little better, right? He gained over there at the Century, but he's lost in 3 out of his last 5 events. The putter's been pretty good, but POA, by the way, if I want to look at his long-term stats, POA is by far his worst surface when it comes to his putting stats. So I think Matt Fitzpatrick's probably the best play. It does slightly conflict with like the Will Zalatoris prop that we're taking because we're taking an under on his strokes. So maybe the best way to go about this would be to take like the Sam Burns over on birdies and then take this over there at Pebble Beach, just so that there's not as much anti-correlation. If Spyglass Hill is actually protected by the wind a little bit more, let's say that it does actually mean a little bit more than I think it does. I honestly don't think it's a big effect. If I'm going to be completely frank with you guys, I think the fact that it's half a mile inland means next to nothing. As somebody that's from down here in Florida, like, sure, that being exposed kind of matters, but you still have wind when you have trees around, right? Like, it's not like it's completely protected. I feel like people think that there's like a shield or a bubble around Spyglass Hill or something, and that's obviously not the case. But let's say that for some reason there's a dome behind Spyglass Hill, then I guess that'd be a good thing to kind of make sure we're not anti-correlating out there between Zalatoris and Fitzpatrick. So yeah, we're gonna make this the slip that we're taking over here in Prize Picks. So it's gonna be the fade on Matt Fitzpatrick. You'd have to shoot -4 in Pebble to go over that. Under that sort of line, which I know compared to the scoring average today seems, not that terrible. But keep in mind that Matt Fitzpatrick is going off super late. He's going to be playing when the conditions are much windier than what you had for today, at least if this wind forecast ends up coming to fruition. And he's going to be finishing up holes 8 and 9 into a very strong wind. It's going to be a lot more difficult. Hell, even hole 7, which is 100 yards, a little wedge shot that played almost a half a stroke under par today, even that's going to play a lot harder because of the fact that you can't just play a stock yardage right into that kind of green. So that's kind of the idea here. Sam Burns, by the way, even if he has some trouble making some bogeys, which could happen even with that early tee time, that's why we took the over on birdies, right? So even if it plays a little bit tougher towards the very end of his round, as long as he's locked up 5 birdies over his 18 holes, that's all we care about, right? Whether that's an even par -1 round or him shooting -5, -6, it really doesn't matter out there at the end of the day. So I kind of like what we're doing here with that. We're avoiding some of the bogey risk by taking a birdie line. And then I already told you guys why I like the Matt Fitzpatrick fade. It's the form, it's the tee time, it's the golf course that he's playing. I don't think it makes quite a bit of sense. So let's go over here to Underdog, see what we can find over here. They don't have their entire board posted quite yet, so we'll see what they have up here. But of course, guys, for all the exposure that I'm getting to, make sure to check out my Patreon page. There's a link in the description of this video, this live stream replay, if you're watching it after the fact, where you can join to get all of the slips that I'm taking. So here in the video, I'm going to try and give you guys a Prize Picks and an Underdog slip, but there's likely going to be a lot more exposure than I'm getting out to for tomorrow. So for all of that, that's where you can find it over there on the Patreon page. Let me catch up on chat. I wish I had a water here. Forgot to grab one. And then we'll keep it going over here in Underdog. Do I like Scotty for a top 10 and Cantlay for a top 20 for a -125 parlay? I'd honestly have to do analysis for you. Like I'd have to actually run the numbers to give you an answer. And that's not something I can do on live stream. So I know you're in the Patreon. Maybe ask the question over there and I can get back to you later. Any thoughts on Tom Kim versus Ben Griffin for a birdie or better matchup? So if that's a 0.5, I would say to stay away. But if it's a 0 matchup, I'd have a little bit of interest for the over. So yeah, it's a 0.5 matchup, like you can see there. The reason why I say to maybe stay away is Ben Griffin is a high birdie percentage player. He's been a top 40 birdie percentage guy over the last 3-4 months. And even in this kind of field, he's a top 25 birdie percentage guy, which is surprising, right? He's not always been that very aggressive player, but he's kind of changed his playing style over the last year or so. So I think Tom Kim is the lean towards the over, but that 0.5 takes me off of it. You're thinking to wait and place fade bets on sports books and let the lines move with the low scoring in the morning. Yeah, you could do that too, Mark. I think there will be an adjustment to that with some of the low scores. Definitely a strategy to consider. Primo says, you're the man, Luke. Always appreciate the information. You're the man, Primo. I appreciate the kind words. Jeremy says, you love the content. Can I tell you how I feel about Bobby Mack over 4.5 birdies? He's got the early tee time. Okay. And he's got an average of 5.6 per round. Yeah, he is a stud. He's a high birdie percentage guy. I don't know if he's averaging 5.6 per round. I don't think that's correct, if I'm going to be completely honest with you. But yeah, let's go through it. The reason I say that is Scotty averaged like 5.1, and he was number 1 on tour. But he's playing at Spyglass. He's got the early tee time, as you've already mentioned. I do want to see what side he starts on. So he starts on hole number 1. He's going to get to take care of some of those seaside holes right out of the bat, which I think is huge if you're playing at Spyglass. Like if the wind kicks up and you are on the backside that's more protected, if there's anyone that's actually going to see an advantage to having that kind of situation, it is guys starting on hole number 1. So yeah, I'm not against it. I do want to look at the sportsbook odds just to see if we have something for comparison. So let's see. We do. He is about even money there at 70.5. I would lean towards the under though. The reason I say that is he's at least, or at worst, I would say, about an average player in this kind of field. I would even venture to say that he's a slightly above average player in this kind of field. So I'm okay with that, especially because he's one of the first few groups off. Do I like Keegan versus Fitz in a head-to-head? Yes, for sure, Dave. Keegan is playing a lot better golf than Matty Fitz, not just this week, but the last month or so. And I think it's a better course fit as well. He's a better putter on POA than Matty Fitz. Like I said, the form there is as well. Can we ask for a third suggestion on the slips? There'll be others posted, Wheelman. So if you're a part of the Patreon page or that sort of thing, just take from one of the other slips that we enter, right? Or for example, we're going to go over some prize picks props, some underdog props on top of the prize pick stuff that we've already gone through. You can just add on to it with that. So I'm not going to build the slips for you, Willman. That's something that I don't really like to do. I even mentioned that with my Patreon members. Like you enter what you want to, right? Just because I'm entering something doesn't mean that you have to yourself. You should use your own discretion with your betting, right? You're putting your own hard-earned money out there behind these kind of slips. I'm always going to tell you my reasoning, always going to tell you what kind of value I think a slip is. It's up to you, your discretion to go out there and use them. So yeah, no, I'm not just going to like give you one right now. Just listen along, man. And if you see another prop that you want to mix in, then feel free, right? What's going on, Dave? Keegan over 1.5 bogeys. Not sure where you see that line because they don't have them posted on either of these two sites out there for bogeys or worse. But yeah, a 1.5 bogey line. Let me see what golf course he's playing. Let's see. So he's playing Pebble Beach, the easier out of the two. The bogey average today was about 1.62 per round. I mean, I guess. Like, I think it's an okay lean. Well, let me see when he's teeing off. I honestly like Keegan this week. So, no, I probably wouldn't take that. I like him at this golf course. DP World Tour questions. Yeah, you can ask them, but I'm not a huge watcher this week. I'm not really paying attention to that side of things. The strokes lines and underdogs seem attackable. Let me know what you think because I haven't looked at it myself. So let me know if you think they're too high or too low or whatever you're thinking. Bruzy says Scotty or JT, who wins? I hope one of the two wins because I have an outright bet on both of them. But, Scotty is going to be a hard guy to beat. He's the current favorite over there on Sportsbook. So it'd be hard not to pick him. Danny says, how would I feel if I picked Scotty in a one and done? Or how would I be feeling? Be feeling pretty good about it. Now, I don't think it was the best pick if I'm going to be nitpicky, if I'm going to give you my true thoughts on you doing that. I think that in his first event back, it was probably not the wisest choice, especially knowing that he's such a good fit at the Masters. He's going to be the big favorite over there at Oakmont. If you thought 5-1 was crazy at this event, he might be 3-1 at Oakmont because he's such a good course fit. That aside, you already made the decision, right? You already played him and one and done. Can't change that. I'd be feeling okay about it right now. Let's just put it that way, right? I think he's got a good chance to win this event. His current top 5 odds are like 60% on some of the simulations that you have out there. I'd be feeling good about that if you used them this week. But I got to say, Danny, I don't think that was I don't want to say like a dumb choice, but I don't think it was the wisest choice. Let's put it that way. Let's go through this board. So the board over here in Underdog's pretty similar to what you had over there in Prize Picks. They're about 0.5 lower on some of the studs. So as opposed to 67 on Underdog, on Prize Picks, Underdog has them 0.5 lower at 66.5. Rory McIlroy's at 67.5 over there on the Prize Picks side, 0.5 lower over here in Underdog. So if you were going to try and find fades, I think the better side to do it is over here on the Underdog side. Now, Matty Fitz is at the same number, so it doesn't really matter where you go out there and fade that sort of play. But with some of these guys that are 0.5 lower, in some cases, I think it could make sense to go out there and mix in some fades. So what I'm trying to look through on here are guys that have a 0.5 to an entire stroke discrepancy, and then trying to get them going off late, because ideally our fades, we went with the latest tee time possible. So let's see Straka. So yeah, he's 0.5 higher over there in Prize Picks. I thought he might have been an entire stroke higher. So that's why I was going out there and checking that. I wish over here on Underdog, they had the courses labeled. That would make our lives a lot easier when it comes to coming through this board. But let's see. Yeah, it's a pain in the ass, I've got to say, going through this board and not having the actual lines on here. So Keegan Bradley, he's at 68.5 and he's minus 130 for the over. Rather than fading him for 1.5 bogeys, I think I'd rather fade the strokes line if you're going to try and find a fade for Keegan Bradley. Now, I don't want to fade Keegan because I think he's going to have a pretty good day, but that's where I would be leaning if I'd be doing that sort of thing. Let's see if Billy Horschel has any odds. He does, and he's at 69.5. Billy Horschel, I hate to pick on the guy, just not in the best form out here on tour. Does have an earlier tee time, though. So I guess that's the one thing we could really focus on when it comes to some of these fades, is trying to get guys that are some of the last few groups out. So Keegan Bradley, I guess the one reason for taking that over in bogeys would be the fact that he's going off a little bit later. But a few other guys that have later tee times would be Corey Connors, we mentioned a little bit earlier. The 70 strokes line, I think if it was at 69.5, I'd be all over that sort of fade. But going through these, who else is super late? I like that the tee times are at least easier to read over here. But like a Jordan Spieth, God, I hate fading Jordan. But he's at the same number on both sites. So you know what? We're not going to fade him then. You guys know, if you don't know this, by the way, I'm the biggest Jordan Spieth fan ever. So if I ever fade Jordan Spieth, just know that it's a really good value line, but I will only fade him if it's an insane value line. And 68.5 strokes is not that. So we're definitely not going to do so. But yeah, unfortunately, not as many guys that are going off as late as what I'd be hoping for. And just to go back to the tee times, if we're going to fade somebody over here at Pebble Beach, which I think could make sense with how exposed it is, we want guys that are starting on hole number 10. So we already faded Matty Fitz. We already knew that one was a thing, but we could look at guys like a McNeely, I guess, like a Højgaard could be a potential fade. Højgaard had the really good day today, and I got to say, he's one of my guys, kind of like Jordan, that I don't really like fading. But these sort of plays, let's do it over here on the proper site, I guess. Guess what I'll be looking for a fade today. Let's see. He's at 68 strokes instead of 68.5 over there. Okay. So we could be cooking with that kind of fade here in Underdog. Let's try and find another one to mix in. And the reason why I want to fade Rasmus, by the way, just to show you some of the shots gained metrics, he kind of luck sacked it today. So for as much as I like the guy, he's an absolute striper, DP World Tour stud that you're going to become very familiar with this year. He's one of the best players that we have coming from that side of the tour. He had a pretty good day, but he gained 1.5 strokes around the green. He had a pretty good day putting. His ball striking was solid, but it wasn't otherworldly. And now that he's going to have that later tee time, face those harder conditions, would have to shoot -5 to cover, I think I feel pretty decent about that fade. So 12:27 tee time, isn't the latest that we could possibly target, but I think it's a pretty decent one. I like going over here in Prize Picks just because we can actually see what golf course these guys are playing. The tee times wouldn't be a bad way to do it either. Let's go to the Spyglass guys that are starting on the back nine. So Van Rooyen, we already know doesn't have a line. We could go to Akshay. We could look at probably not an Eric Cole fade. Probably not a Sam Stevens fade. He's just in too good a form to want to go out there and fade. What about Victor Hovland? And I hate to pick on him, but even after his round today, he didn't seem all that convinced that he was going to go low once again. Let's see if he has a line here on DraftKings. So he's about even money at 70.5. So that's an entire stroke higher, right? That's an entire stroke difference. He is at the same line over here on Prize Picks, though. So that is the one, I guess, negative out there behind that kind of prop. But these two sort of players that, they're playing towards the end of tee times. They're not like the last group out, but they're towards the end of tee times. They're playing in some slightly harder conditions, both kind of luck-sacked it out there today. These would be the kind of fades that I'm looking at for round number 2. Now, I'm not sure this is going to be a slip I'm actually going to enter. The slip over there in Prize Picks I feel a lot better about, 100% when I'm going to be posting over there in Patreon. I'll probably end up fading this Højgaard prop. The Victor Hovland one, I'm going to have to do a little bit more research on. So obviously, I can't do the full deep dive here on live stream as I got to do some of my sims and projections afterwards over there in my spreadsheets. But there's a near certainty that I'm going to play that Rasmus Højgaard fade. We're just going to have to see about the pairing because I'm not against paying this 2.7x payout. The anti-correlation, the correlation here, I should say, I'm okay taking because I think the conditions are going to be a little bit tougher later. But we'll have to see if I think it's enough value there. It is a stroke higher, right? I mean, it's not something we can avoid compared or can completely ignore compared to over here on sites like DraftKings, but I do wish he was at least at 70 strokes on Prize Picks. That would make me feel just a little bit better about that spot. Let's see. How would I be feeling? I already answered that. You like Jordan Spieth too? Yeah, he's just a really nice guy. A fun player to watch too. I mean, he misses a lot of fairways, misses a lot of greens. And I know a lot of people like the Scotty Schefflers that hit every green, go out there and ball strike it to death. But when you're missing and you're out of position, you've got to hit creative shots to bail yourself out. And I think that's what the Jordan Spieth experience is all about. Let's go through a few matchups. So in terms of what I normally look for in terms of matchup bets is I want to try and find sustainable shots gained metrics. And the best way to do that is normally to look at the round 1 shots gained. And if we take a look at that, you don't want to look at guys like Rory JT because for the most part, you're not going to get a really good matchup or really good odds out there for the next round. But like a Tom Hoge would make a lot of sense. Tom Hoge not only gained strokes ball striking, mostly out there in approach, but he lost 2.5 strokes putting in. If you knew anything about his POA numbers, he's historically one of the better POA putters that we have in this field. So let me see what we have on him because I'm not against that at all. Let's see. So we want the 2 balls listed around. And let's find Tom Hoge. My AC, by the way, needs turned down. I'm sweating my ass off right now. So he's going against a Justin Rose. So let's star Hoge, and then let's find Justin Rose on here as well and do a little comparison between these two. They both had a pretty good round. So it's going to be kind of hard to parse the data between these two. But what you'll see is that Tom Hoge did have the better day on approach. And the putter favored Justin Rose, right? That's why he ended up winning their matchup by 3 strokes. But if Justin Rose comes back down to earth a little bit, Tom Hoge has a better day on the greens, which I would say is likely considering that we're on POA. I would say that's going to be a lot closer this time around. And I'd rather have the better iron player, right? If we're trying to break that kind of tie. So it's minus 130 over here on DraftKings. Let me see what we have over here in Fanduel. I'm losing my mind with how hot it is in my room right now. He's minus 130 as opposed to minus 140 over here on Fanduel. And then just to double check, make sure we're getting the best odds between the big 3. Let me see what they have him at over here in Caesars. That minus 130 might be the best that we can find. Just to make sure. So he's minus 135 over there in Caesars. This minus 130, I'm not against playing. Now, I don't have access to any of those books. I'm going to have to check over here on Hard Rock Bet. That's where I have access to down here in Florida. If I can get minus 130, minus 135, I'm going to play it for a full unit bet. So let me see if there's anything posted. a lot of times they're pretty slow with getting these up. So they're starting to post them. It looks like they don't have everything posted quite yet. Tom Hoagie does not have a matchup posted. So I'm assuming throughout the night, they're going to be adding them to the board. They've got the first few groups out, like Keith Mitchell, McCarthy posted, groups like Gim versus Spawn, but not the rest of the board. So yeah, if I can find that minus 130 odds, I'll probably take a gander there. But let's see what else we can find on the board, because I ideally want to find someone that's ball striking it well, that's playing against somebody that maybe didn't ball strike it as well in round one. Rose wasn't hitting it as well as Tom Hoagie, but he was still playing pretty well, all things considered. So a few other players, I think Gary Woodland would be a good one to look at, especially because he lost strokes putting. He also has a little bit of room for improvement there. So let's find who he's matched up against. So he's going against... Okay, it's not Tommy Fleetwood. Let's find Gary Woodland. There he is. He's plus 105, but he's against Adam Scott. And I can already tell you that Adam Scott's not the best player to pick on, because he is a little bit of a sleeping giant, I would say. He gained off the tee, maybe wasn't his best on approach, but his short game, he's not going to be as bad tomorrow. He's not going to lose nearly 5 strokes out there between his around the green and with the putter. He's normally a lot better in both of those two categories. So yeah, let's not pick on Adam Scott. I don't think that's wise. Let's see. Honestly, a lot of these guys that gained on approach, I don't know if they're going to continue it. And the ones that I think are going to continue it, like a JT, a Scotty Scheffler, like you're not going to get great odds. Like Scotty Scheffler going against, I forget who he's paired with, but he's probably going to be like minus 200 odds. JT is probably like minus 200 versus a Jordan Spieth. Like we're just not going to play that. I guess if you were going to, right, you would parlay them, try and do something like that out there for your exposure. My favorite's probably that Tom Hoagie prop that we already went through on there. Mark Hubbard, I just don't think it's the best course fit this week. He doesn't hit the ball particularly high. Rasmus, I kind of think is going to come back down to earth a little bit. That's why we're looking at the fade there at 68 strokes. Doug Gim, I do have to say, statistically, he's got a lot of regression coming there with his 5 shots gained to lost putting. Like he's just probably not going to lose 5 strokes again. It's hard to believe that he's going to bleed that many strokes on the greens. Yeah, I don't know. The shots gained metrics usually make our job a little bit easier than what we have here, but we don't want to force anything in either, right? We want to make sure that we're going after props that make sense. So we're going to stick to that Tom Hoagie one. If there's anything else I end up seeing or any other ones you guys want me to go through, I will. But if not, I think we're going to cut it off there. So we did have a question about Willie Z versus Grazermint. So yeah, if it's the round matchup, I'd be leaning towards Willie Z for sure. The shots gained metrics are going to reflect that. Willie Z has quite a bit of around the green and putting regression coming out there for round 2. Grazerman was just kind of like average across the board. So if you're getting even money odds, I'd much rather have that. And DraftKings has the best odds. That's good to know. And it's not usually the case. Thank you for the very honest answer. Hoping Scotty can pull it off. Yeah, that's the thing, man. I try not to be an asshole about it, but I'm super blunt. I'm super honest, like with everyone in my life. It's not just you guys here on live stream. I tell things to my family members I probably shouldn't say that are bluntly honest, but I think people appreciate that too, right? My mouth can definitely get me in trouble at times, but it has its charm too, right? People know that I'm not going to hold anything back. That's for sure. So yeah, I'm glad that you appreciate that. Let's put it that way. Let's pick on Henley. We could. Yeah, dude. By the way, I was kind of pointing that out in my showdown stream. He is somebody we can pick on. And I kind of like what you're thinking there, man. Look at this, by the way, guys. He gained nearly 6 strokes with the short game. That is just, it's not going to happen again. He's not going to go out there and have that kind of day. Let me see what his line's at. You could be cooking here because he's at 68. He's probably at 68 and a half over here, right? Let's see. Yeah, he's at 68 and a half. All right. Here's the second slip. If you guys stayed the whole way to the end, I guess you're going to get a second full slip that we're going to go out there and enter. But Rasmus, 0.5 higher in prize picks. Same thing with Russell Henley. Henley, you're picking on the short game stats. And I hate to pick on Højgaard because he's a stud. He's made me so much money taking his over on birdies on the DP World Tour. I got to say, my hit rate on Rasmus over on birdies has got to be like 90% for my career. There's a reason why I love the guy. Like it's kind of like Jordan Spieth. My hit rate on props for Jordan Spieth is like 90% for my career. So a lot of good vibes going. I got to say, after shooting -7, he's not the kind of guy that normally does that twice, or else he'd have like 100 tour wins, because he has these low rounds all the time on the DP World Tour. And you know what he usually does the next day? He usually has a flat egg. He goes out there, shoots like even par -1. Now, a -3 round would still go over this kind of line, right? So like, let's keep that in mind out there with this kind of fade. We're not even asking him to have a terrible round. We're just asking him not to shoot -5 or better. And considering the conditions, getting a little bit harder out there for round number 2, I think that's a pretty decent bet to make. So good call down there in Chapman. He's somebody to pick on. You're 100% right. And I wish I would have thought about that earlier, because like when I was going through the showdown stuff, I was like, we got to fade a Henley prop later, because the shots gained metrics are just crazy. Do I like mega chalk matchup parlays? No. So like when I was talking about like the Scotty JT matchup parlay, that's never something I would enter. Like that kind of parlay is usually just donating money long term. So yeah, definitely don't like them. Scotty over Rory head to head. Yes, I would take Scotty, just because the shots gains profiles are very similar between those two players. Rory's been playing recently. He's had all the experience on the DP World Tour over the last month or so, and he only did what he did, right? He went out there, had, I think, one better round, one better shot out there than Scotty Scheffler. Scotty Scheffler came off the shelf and looked just as good. So imagine if he improves on that in round number 2. I definitely like that. What about fading Morikawa and Rory at 67.5? If you're going to fade Rory, do it at 67 on Underdog is what I would say. He's 0.5 lower. But Morikawa, Rory, they both hit the ball very well, so I don't know if I love it. Scotty over Rory at Pebble is a lock. Yeah, exactly. Especially because that golf course favors the really good iron players like a Scotty Scheffler. So speaking of, I think they had a Scotty Scheffler versus Rory one up on Hard Rock. I might be able to enter that myself. Let's see. So they do have it posted, and Scotty is a favorite. He's there at -135. You know what? I'll boost it 10%, so that's a little bit better, and I'll max it out. They'll only let me put $50 on the boosted bet, but I like that. I'm going to tail that. And then day under 5.5 birdies. What golf? He's playing at Pebble, right? And he's got a relatively early tee time. I get what you're doing, especially because conditions might be a little bit harder. But the only reasoning against that, Dave, is that you might want to go for a later guy in terms of his tee time, and somebody on Spyglass if you're going to be fading birdies. That's all I've got, guys. I appreciate you guys stopping by as per usual. Smash that like button if you guys haven't already. Also subscribe so you don't miss any of the content to come. That'll include our live streams out there for rounds 3 and 4, which will be live an hour or 2 after the play ends. So just like tonight, make sure to stop by for all that content throughout the weekend. And for all the pieces of exposure that I'm going with, on top of the 2 slips that we went up over here on the live stream, I'll make sure to check out my Patreon page. Link in the description to go out there and join. It doesn't cost you an arm and a leg to join over there either. It's only $15 a month for all the different prop analysis that I'm doing, including stat averages, weather reports out there for every single round, and complete analysis when it comes to Underdog Prize Picks. The slips, the reasoning behind everything that I'm playing, and even the kind of unit and betting size that I'm going with as well. So make sure to check that out if you guys haven't already. Until next time, let's go out there and smash over the weekend.